Hi everybody, welcome to the English Department's YouTube video. Now in this video I'm going to be talking to you about what you're going to be doing in English in September. I'm also going to be giving you an overview of ideas of what you could be doing to prepare for September using the work packs that have just been sent home recently. So this video will cover year 7 to year 10 independently, but I will start with year 7 first. So in year 7, when you arrive, you will be starting with a new unit called the Origins of Fiction. Now, this unit will focus on fairy tales, myths and legends from different eras and from different parts of the world. So the core part of the unit will be looking at the Brothers Grimm. Now, these two brothers, once upon a time, travelled the world and they collected oral stories in which they decided that they were going to publish. So they took the stories and they wrote them down. Now, when you hear a story and you repeat it to somebody else, sometimes you change details, sometimes you miss things out, sometimes you add your little spin. And that's exactly what the brothers did, because the stories that they published were slightly different from the originals, but they also ensured that these stories fit in with what the German people expected, or the certain sort of religious ideas. And a few of these stories that you may have heard of, because it's only the last 50-60 years that Disney have taken the Grimm Brothers stories and they have produced them into films. So the stories that we are going to be looking at are Little Snow White, Hansel and Gretel, Cinderella, Rumpelstiltskin. We were also going to be looking at The Werewolf, which is based on Little Red Riding Hood and The Tiger's Bride, which are both written by Angela Carter and a man called Charles Perrault, who again also wrote some of stories that we are quite familiar with, and we'll go into details about who they are in September. Now, these are just the core stories. We will be having other stories as well and looking at those in detail. So one of the first things you could start doing is actually summarising what each story is about and learning what each story includes. Now, you also might want to think about watching a version of these stories on telly. There's actually versions on YouTube, and getting an idea about how these stories might be different from the Disney version that you know and love. So I'm particularly looking here at Cinderella and Little Snow White, because these stories are very different to the Disney versions, and they are don't always have that happy ending, should we say. Now, also in your knowledge organiser, you have a summary of the Brothers Grimm and who they are, with that basic information that you're going to need. So it tells you about where they were born, what time the Brothers Grimm published their texts, and how they became popular. What you could do is to further that is to write an author study. So you could go on to the internet and find out a bit more information about these brothers to give you that background knowledge before you come into September. So that's two ideas. Now, the third idea, which would be really useful, is actually looking at the different subject terminology which you have been given. Now, some of this is going to be quite familiar from primary school. However, as you come into year 7, we'll look at it in a different way, and we will also obviously be looking at writing and including this terminology into our stories, into our written work, into our analytical work. So you have got quite a few. So you've got section D, which gives you a general sort of overview of subject terminology which you would use when we're discussing text and reading. You've also got some more in section B, and again in sections E and F. As you know, when you come in September, every English lesson will start with a Do It Now activity, as will all your subjects. but obviously I'm focusing on just English. You will start usually with a task where it asks you to define 3 words, and these words can be found on your knowledge organiser, and it will ask you to think about or writing the definition into your own words. So for example, in lesson 1, when you arrive in September, your first doing activity is going to ask you to define what a simile is, what imagery is, and what connotations are, and you can find that on the knowledge organiser. And then you have a stretch it, and that stretch it is going to ask you to apply one of those words to your own idea. So it's going to ask you what the connotations of the colour red are, and that is something you could start thinking about. And the next idea, which I think is idea 4, is going to focus on section F. So section F is the conventions of the genre. So what I mean there is what you're going to find in every fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. So in every tale there's going to be heroes, villains, magic, and a happy ending. Or is there? What you could have a look at is when you're watching your Disney versions of these fairy tales, you could jot down who the heroes are of the story, who the villains are, what magic appears, and is there a happy ending or not. But the most important, I think, is the moral. So what is the message that director, that author, he's trying to leave you with? Is it you should always be good? Is it that if you're bad you will be punished? And that's the sort of ideas that we'll be looking at when we start looking at our Grimm's fairy tales in September. If you have any questions before that, you can email and contact us on the English department email address, which you should have a copy of. Thank you.